How are you? My name is Abiram. I'm in 11th grade. And today I'm going to be talking about chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, verses 1 through 16. So the first 16 verses. Feel free to stop me whenever you want and ask any questions because honestly I don't have that much prepared for the full hour. And it'll be much more insightful if you ask questions and interact. Okay. Let's start with the opening prayer. Sahano punaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Okay, let's just start with a little recap of chapter 1 and chapter 2. So chapter 1 was kind of Arjuna explaining all of his problems and his doubts to Krishna, like the very beginning of that conversation, and him kind of explaining that he's really confused on what to do because everything in his heart is kind of telling him that he shouldn't be fighting this war and he shouldn't be attacking his elders and his people who he was raised with. But Krishna, on the other hand, is saying, yes, you should do it. And I think that kind of just really confused him. And then chapter 2, Krishna is kind of explaining that in order to get enlightened and to gain liberation, you have to do Jnana Yoga, which is the path of knowledge. And he kind of implies that this is better than Karma Yoga, which is the path of action. So he's explaining that Jnana Yoga, the entire goal is to know thyself. It's the ultimate spiritual goal, to understand who we are, what our place is, what Bhagavan has put us on earth for, and kind of understanding that relationship will gain us that spiritual enlightenment. And yeah, so our kind of relation to nature and to Brahman and even to other people, all of that, kind of exploring that and understanding that is going to end up helping us be liberated and be enlightened. So then that's where chapter 3 comes in, because chapter 3, Arjuna is saying, well, if Jnana Yoga is so good and this is like the ultimate solution, why are you telling me to do action? Why are you telling me to fight a war rather than me just leaving the battlefield and going to an ashram and meditating and learning rather than fighting this war? And that's when Krishna is going to say, yes, Jnana Yoga is the best solution, but it's really hard for normal people like us to do, because obviously, what I just said before with Jnana Yoga, it's very philosophical and it's very complex. So many questions that you have to answer on your own about things you honestly can never be that sure of. It's not like scientific where you can do an experiment and figure it out. You have to understand yourself and be confident in yourself and your knowledge and the knowledge of the people around you who are teaching you constantly every single day. So it's really hard to do, which is why Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga kind of act as an intermediate. I would say I would compare it to going upstairs. Going up one very steep stair takes a lot more effort and time than going up 2 or 3 shorter stairs. It's much easier, it's much more gradual, kind of like baby steps. It's quicker and it's more efficient. Because Jnana Yoga also requires full detachment. You have to remove everything from your life, and that's not something that you can do quickly or immediately without repercussions, which I'll talk about later. So you do need that gradual step of saying, oh, I'm going to relinquish things that I'm kind of selfish about, and then start to relinquish things that aren't really necessary, and to just keep going until you get that spiritual enlightenment. So,
Sorry, so excuse me, so
Yeah.
you're comparing Karma Yoga, like smaller steps, to Jnana Yoga, which is steep steps.
yes.
And then will you talk about Bhakti Yoga and how that fits in?
So Bhakti Yoga will be talked about later on, but it is very similar to Karma Yoga in that it is also those shorter steps, and you can kind of merge them to make it go faster, and then go to that Jnana Yoga that'll end up leading you to like moksha and liberation.
So if you do Karma Yoga, you have to do the Jnana Yoga?
I think
Yeah, so I'm going to come to the mic and share because we also. So what is the question?
Question is,
Can you finish the?
Oh, yeah, sure.
presentation? Yeah, so then we can ask questions. We'll have last 15 minutes.
Okay.
So that way we can set up the mic.
He said he can.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
We always say that usually.
You're doing a great job, everyone. Hey, good plus.
okay. I also said it was kind of like learning an instrument because, like for example, the piano. Imagine someone you have no experience doing the piano, and someone tells you, "Oh, play this song on the piano," and you're just kind of like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." And so you search it up, and you have to learn all this stuff on your own, and it's going to take a lot more time. And maybe at the end of the day, you aren't even perfect at the song. Versus if you go to a teacher or someone who's already learned piano. Okay. Yeah, if you go to someone who's already learned piano and already experienced, they can teach you, and they can teach you things that you. Hello. Yeah. Things that you couldn't figure out on your own, and it's a lot more faster. It's a lot more efficient. And you may even get more out of it than if you just try to do it on your own. So that's kind of what it is with the Jnana Yoga and the Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, is that if you try to go immediately into Jnana Yoga, there's a lot more room for error, and it's just a lot less efficient versus going in with Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga and then reaching that easier start. It's like a catalyst to Jnana Yoga. So then when you do get to Jnana Yoga, it is a lot more easier and faster and more efficient. So those were verses 1 and 2. And verses 3 and 4 start to get into the common misconceptions about Karma Yoga. So one misconception is that one of these paths is better and exclusive to another. Like you can only do one, which is not really true. And this is what Krishna will explain. He says that he, or like Bhagwan, purposefully created multiple paths because people are so different. We're not the same, so we can't all take the same path and expect the same results. Some people will learn more through reading and through that self-inquiry that Jnana Yoga has. It'll be faster for them. And for other people, we don't have the access to the resources or even the capabilities to just randomly decide, like, I'm going to learn all this and I'm going to be perfect at it. And that's when Karma Yoga comes in, because they can do action, and it's, I'll explain later, it's very simple to do Karma Yoga also. So it's very much the reason that there's multiple paths is not because of any contradiction, but rather there's so many different types of people, and so there's so many different types of paths that are all going to lead us in the same direction. And these verses also explain kind of part of that like process. So Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga also go very hand in hand, but they will kind of allow us to purify our minds. And when we purify our minds, then it's a lot easier for us to understand our relationship with Bhagwan and with nature and with ourselves, and do that Jnana Yoga that'll eventually lead us to enlightenment and lead us to that understanding of who we are and what our role is in this universe.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's fine. Yeah, so it's a lot of evolution that's involved, I think, also. The pages that Gopalanko sent me were kind of talking about, like, in life, a baby can't do the same thing that I can, but that's because the baby will, over time, will learn and grow and change. And all of that growth and change will let them do what I can do at my age. So, like reading or walking or eating on your own. All of that it's learned, and you learn it and then you grow internally, and then you're able to do those things at whatever age, and it kind of helps you progress through life better and reach that point of excellence much quicker and easier and more efficiently, as I explained. Kind of like a fruit, for example. If you tried to eat a fruit that was like right off the tree, wasn't ripe, it would be kind of sour and it wouldn't be that good. Versus the fruit going through that whole process of ripening and becoming like the perfect texture and taste and just an excellent taste. And that's when you take it off the tree, or it falls on its own. So that's kind of why we need Karma Yoga, is that change in that action of growing and transforming will lead us to a better and more excellent state of mind and state of life. So then this raises the question though, why can't we just immediately relinquish all of our actions? Or why can't we just go straight into it, getting rid of all these material things and whatnot? So that's where verses 5 and 6 come in. They are kind of talking about withdrawing from action. Why can't you just withdraw completely and everything will be okay? So these verses talk about our relationship with nature. The verses explain that all of us interact with Prakriti, which is nature. Whether that be the food that we're eating, the people that we're talking to, the air that we're breathing, the bed that we sleep on, all of that stuff is products and also, I guess, reactants of nature. We're all interacting with nature constantly. And nature, Prakriti, is controlled by some ratio, some combination of the three gunas, which is sattva, rajas, and tamas. And these are what say like, oh, and even human beings are also controlled by these gunas. That's what makes us happy versus sad versus lazy versus active. All of that is some ratio or combination of the gunas. And because that ratio is always changing in nature, for example, the weather, it's sunny some days, it's rainy some days, it's dry some days. If nature is always changing constantly and we are constantly relying and depending on it, then we also have to change. So it's like physically impossible for us to say, I'm not going to change, I'm going to be actionless, and I'm going to relinquish all of my actions, because if nature can't, and nature is in the control of these divine spirits that nobody has control over. So if it can't and we can't control ourselves in relation to nature, we can't control our actions in that sense, if that makes sense. So like, for example, breathing. We can't just decide to stop breathing. That counts as an action, and it's something we can't stop because it's what we need to survive, and it's something that's changing with nature constantly. So if you're running, you're breathing really quickly, and if you're not really doing anything, you breathe more slowly. So there's that constant change, a change that you can't control, and if you can't control it, you have to embrace it and adapt to it. So yeah, all those things that I mentioned before called nitya karma, they're all like obligatory actions. So all actions that we need to survive, and obviously the Vedas don't want you to get rid of that, because you need it to survive and to actually be doing all of the yoga in the first place. So it is really important to say that Karma Yoga is not inaction, it's not the lack of action. It's rather transforming how you do your actions, which is kind of what I'll get into next. So at that point, they kind of say, it kind of talks about your physical actions and your internal actions. So your internal actions are thinking, kind of reflecting, all of that type of stuff that you kind of do inside your brain. And then there's external actions. So, me holding up this mic, me talking, me eating. All of that is kind of external. And we don't want to misalign those, if that makes sense. So if we internally are not changing and following a type of like karma yoga type of good action, externally we shouldn't be doing that either. And the Puranas provide a good story for this. There's these two brothers named Tavrit and Suvrit, and they get caught in a storm, and so they just run to the nearest building for shelter. And they take a look around and they realize the building they're next to, or I guess in, is a brothel. It's where prostitutes are. And Tavrit, the older brother, is immediately disgusted, and he says, I'd rather be at the nearby temple learning about the Gita. Like, it's a discourse on the Gita. So he's like, I'd rather be there than here. So he runs out, and Suvrit, the younger brother, doesn't really care because he needs shelter from the rain. So he says, I'm just going to stay here. I won't do any of the bad actions, but I will stay here because I need shelter. And so they both go their separate ways, and the entire time this discourse at the temple is going on, Tavrit is thinking to himself, Suvrit is probably having fun at that brothel, I wish I was there, instead of this boring lecture. And Suvrit is there saying, I can't believe I'm still here, I wish I was at this discourse. My brother's probably getting super enlightened and learning so much. And so they both kind of have their own regrets. And when the rain eventually stops, they both go in that direction, and they both meet each other like halfway, and very morbidly, they both get struck by lightning, and they die. And so the Yamaduta, Lord Yama's servants, come to kind of pick them up and take them to heaven or hell, essentially. And they prepare to take one of them to heaven, and they grab Suvrit. And Tavrit is immediately like, why would you take him? I'm the one that left this disgusting brothel to go to the temple, to go to this Gita discourse. Why would you take him when he decided to stay and not come with me? And the Yamaduta explained, even though you did that physically, and your external action was that you went to the Gita and you went to the temple, internally you were regretting that and wishing you were at the brothel. So you were doing something that didn't align with yourself. Cognitive dissonance is really the word that I would use for that. He was going there, but he didn't mean it. He didn't necessarily believe that he was going. He was going there more because he knew it was holy and because he thought this will lead me to enlightenment and moksha. Versus the brother Suvrit was just there for shelter. And even though he was there, he knew inside that he wanted to be at the temple and that he wanted that spiritual enlightenment. So it is extremely hypocritical for us to do these good actions if we don't mean it inside. Our inside and our outside need to align with each other. So I see this a lot with people who volunteer at like a lot of, especially now because there's so many incentives to volunteer, especially with people my age. It's like you get an award or you get into an honor society, and I mean they are good incentives in that they do. At the end of the day, good things happen. Volunteering happens, but it doesn't really mean anything if you're going there because of some material reward. You're going there because you need the hours. It's rather, you should be going there because you want to help people, because you want to put yourself out there and sacrifice your time and effort towards the welfare of others. So I think that kind of misalignment between the internal and external actions is so important in understanding kind of how we function in this society, because it's very incentive driven nowadays. Even these like nice charitable things are incentive driven. Like people will host charity gala, so it's essentially a party that's also kind of a charity on the side. Like the Met Gala is like, yeah, it's supporting the museum, but at the same time, everybody's just going there to flaunt their fashion. So very incentive driven, so you do have to understand that those things are good, but there's better things you could be doing. There's things that are more aligned, and that's going to reap you more benefits spiritually and posthumously after death also. And then I'll move on to verses 7 and 8. So 7 and 8 says, kind of how I was explaining with the past verses. So Tavrit, the older brother, he did good actions externally. I guess he limited his external actions to good things, but his internal actions were still uncurbed. They were unbothered and unchanged. And so it was the opposite. He had good internal actions, good and limited and restrained self-control, versus his outer actions weren't really as, it didn't appear as enlightened, as spiritual as his older brothers did. So the Gita says you should be doing what's forbidden. You should be having the self-control inside, even if it doesn't mean the outside self-control, because the internal self-control will lead to your outer self-control. The words specifically you could say are like your sense organs versus your action organs. So, me walking is an external action versus me thinking, me having a good philosophical thought is an internal action. So when I have those thoughts and I say, I'm limiting myself to thinking about the welfare of others and thinking about the Lord, then also my outer actions will be reflecting that, and I won't be doing bad things, because it's like out of sight, out of mind type of thing. If I'm not thinking about it, I'm not going to do it, versus me doing it and then also me not really thinking it. It's very hypocritical, and it's almost worse than just not doing anything at all. So yeah, you have to restrain your senses, and that will direct all your actions towards mental clarity, so that your mind will be more clear and more pure, and that will eventually lead to better jnana yoga and enlightenment, as I mentioned. But there's also a happy medium in there, because your senses can't be completely unrestrained. You can't be